Yeah. Hello, my friends, fellow enthusiasts, MERP enthusiasts. Welcome to another installment of my revisitation of Iron Crown Enterprises Middle Earth role-playing game system from the 80s. Um, if you like what I'm doing here, flag it, tag it, tell your friends, subscribe to the channel, as they say. If you don't, all right, whatever. You're here or you're not. This will be one of the earliest source books, all modules that they came out with, was the called Angmar, the Land of the Witch King, and it was in 1982 that this came out. I was 15 ish, I think, almost 16 when it came out. So probably among one of the first trips I made to Ivor's Dungeon when I got my driver's license to purchase game material would have been this particular supplement. So that makes it 30, almost over 30 years old, right? Yeah, 33, something like that. It actually shows some wear and tear. It's one of some of my books are almost pristine, and others, you can see material. This one here had some issues with it. I think I taped it one time. The tape came off, but because it shows the residue from tape. Trying to get the life expectancy out of it as much as I can. There's a little buzzball right there. Yeah. You gonna read this for him? Huh? You gonna read this for him? Investigating my breakfast bowl. That's what she's doing. Just yeah, she's being nosy. Something else. Okay. Well, it's a thin source book. It actually covers a large area. It does. I don't recall it coming with a map, but it may have. Like I said, a lot of my maps got into storage, and over the years have gotten either misplaced or in a box. I have yet to recover all of them. So I managed to get a good chunk of them. This one does include a scaled down map, several actually, of the region in question, and of course, like I said, gosh darn it, I was just looking at the damn thing. Yeah, there we go. Black and white version of what the color one would look like. Now, a couple key things. Uh, the Witch King, if you go and read his history, is one of the three Black Numerians who were enticed and seduced by Sauron to eventually, and given one of the 9 rings of mortal men, who eventually die or become undead, if you will, and are servants, the flunkies of the Dark Lord. Now, the Witch King is the most powerful, and I believe the first, but not quote me on that. It may not be the first, but he was promised. He was the most high-ranked and influential one of his era. He was actually a high-level member of the Nermarian court, and he was seduced by Sauron when Sauron was a captive of Farzan or whatever, before the uh, the humans made the mistake of trying to invade the Undying Lands and saw their island kingdom sunk by a very unhappy god of the ocean. The king was promised early on at some point a kingdom of his own. He was a prince, so he had never ruled a kingdom. Now the other 6 ringwraiths, but those are all self-made kings or born into a king bloodline at some point, and ruled a kingdom somewhere in the east of Middle Earth. And the Witch King was promised a kingdom of his own. And at one point, this is that kingdom. The Dark Lord sent him north to wear down and ultimately destroy Arnor, to see the destruction of the northern of the 2 Dunedain kingdoms established in Western Middle Earth. And to do that, he went to the far north into a very inhospitable region and set up a kingdom. It has fortresses and a few towns. It has his major citadel. It's where he marshals his armies and his servants and so on and so forth, and they march forth or skulk forth to interfere with and or to attack directly Arnor and its three breakaway little kingdoms later on. He achieves this over a considerable amount of time. This isn't something that just happened in a generation or two. According to the story, he was, Angmar lasted better part of 1,000 years. Not quite, but close enough to see Arnor divided into three kingdoms, and then those three kingdoms fight among themselves. And Mordor was easily suborned to his cause and basically became one of his flunky states. He then proceeded to wear down and eventually destroy the kingdom of Gardelin by eradicating its bloodline in a battle. And then Arthur they put up a fight for quite a while, and then eventually was overwhelmed. And that's the story. And then by the time the army of the forces of Gondor and the elves of the Western Havens, the blue whatever, came to their aid, the battle for Fornos was over, and the Northern Army was devastated, and most of its people were being scattered to the four winds. So, but they did arrive. They did confront the Witch King's main force and destroy it. So it was a prophetic victory in some aspects, but it didn't matter in the long run because the sustainability of Angmar was not part of the grand scheme for Sauron. The Dark Lord's servant, the Witch King, achieved his majority of his goals, and at that point, the kingdom was now no longer viable, no longer required. Now, the book here talks about the locations and the vicinities of the forts and some of the towns and the harshness of the terrain and how majority of it's not conducive to farming. So, in one aspect, it's a similar dry run for Mordor, because Mordor proper also can't sustain itself, can't feed its armies unless they eat themselves, which, goblins and orcs are known to do. But they use a lot of men, and men require normal food. They're not going to eat orc. And I don't even think Dunlandings would go that far. Just saying. So, they have to bring Manish armies, Manish recruits, if you will, from the east, and they have to cross the upper Udin, the Great River Valley, and which would be through the territory at this time, what would be the ancestors of the Rohirrim, as well as the Bajorans and the Barrenings and the men of Mirkwood, which was Greenwood at the time, and Thunderl's elves, and so on and so forth. So, having a supply train that runs up through the Grey Mountains, dealing with all the critters and the dragons and the dwarves and other people that are up there as well at that time, it was a challenge. So, keeping his army supplied, keeping his kingdom moving forward was, a good learning experience for running, the later running Sauron's empire later. So, the source book itself contains is set roughly in the 16 to 1400 period of the Third Age. This is 1,000 years before the War of the Ring. The forward in the book says that the creators and writers of this particular supplement or the game system decided that was a good year, and I've mentioned it before because it was a time when it's several years after the Great Plague, so you still got great areas of devastation and desolation like you would at the time of the War of the Ring. You still have considerable areas that by the time of the War of the Ring are now old ancient ruins or forgotten locations still in existence. So Arthedain is still more or less in the fray. Bree is still there. There's a butter bar still running Bree, the son of the sun, so on and so forth. The Moria is still cousin dumb, and the Dwarves are still enthroned there. Gondor is not quite. It's in its golden years. It's past its peak. It's not quite on the slow slide down the hill, but it's starting. So this is the way this is. It's a good time and place to run the campaign, as far as I've experienced, and I've done it several times in that timeline. Now, Angmar, it talks of, it goes into some detail, their typical charts and NPCs and local plants and animals and fauna. We also have some good breakdowns of towns, cities, and fortifications. Now, as I've said before numerous times, being a lazy GM, sometimes it's just more convenient to sit there and pick up one of these source books for another game system and utilize the pre-made, fortresses and manors and towns and what have you to save yourself a little bit of effort and time, especially when you know your players are and they're not going to hang out for any great length of time in some location. So why go to a great effort to create something from scratch every time? It also lists touches on Carndom. Now, some of you newer players or newer people might be familiar with that one from, they mention Angmar. Gandalf mentions Angmar in the movies several times, especially when he goes up to search for the tombs of the Witch King and finds it open. Carndom, on the other hand, is referenced more than that, many more times, because Bolg and Azog are from Carndom, and that's where his forces originated from. And it is a major Orcish citadel in the north of the Unaduin Valley, the Great River Valley, where the mountains all come to, where the Misty Mountains, the Gray Mountains all hit. It's actually on the eastern side of that junction. On the western side of that junction is our Angmar, or the ruins and ancient kingdom of Angmar at the point of the movie. Now, we do have a source book for Carndom, so at some point I will get to that one. So they touched on it in here, but it's from this they built on this to create the bigger one, and so forth. Now, there's a number of adventures in here, adventure ideas. Mostly what we're dealing with here is two options. Either your players are mercenaries who are employed by the Witch King or his minions, and that can go in any way you want it to go. I mean, if they are truly neutral and inclined to that sort of thing, then so be it. On the other hand, they might be troubled by their fact that they have, their good tendencies and this conflicts and stuff with their belief system. Then have it go that way. The other set of adventure is where you are a agent of either one of the elven lords or agents of the king of Arthedain, who sends you up to spy on what the forces of Angmar are doing. That's how the story itself is told. The source book is told from the perspective of a traveling merchant who's actually spying out the area and getting intel for the Arthedain king. Excuse me. The yawns never stop. And it's a good book. It's a good source book. It's a viable evil kingdom in any game system you want to play. That's one of the things I've always championed about most game systems, and MERP's no exception. You can take this and set it up in your own world or set it up in any world of any creation that more or less mimics the style. Tweak it a little bit, change a few things. Don't change anything. I mean, the law of averages dictate that most names are going to be reused more than once, right? Just as long as you're not trying to publish this thing You're not going to be stepping on anybody's toes. So, land of the Witch King, Angmar. Get it, love it, hate it. Let it sit on the shelf and rot.